You're live.
Welcome everyone to Mythinformed with your hosts, Brian and Dimitri. Today we have with us an awesome guest, Paulogia, a very well-read former young Earth creationist who runs a successful YouTube channel by day and is obviously converting theists to atheists by night. Welcome, Paulogia.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Or should we go by Paul?
Paul is fine. Depending on, my name is a play on the Greek Paulogia, which sometimes says Paulogia, so that just throws people off. So Paul is fine.
No, but you have a pretty kick-ass intro song that you have for your videos. So that was going to be one of my questions, is how you came up with that, or whether you're just a techno fan in general.
Oh, well, that actually is thanks to my 14-year-old son, who enjoys, for some reason, open source music more than the Apple Music subscription that I pay for him. And I just picked that out at one point. I'm like, that's my theme song before I even had a channel. So, yeah.
So he created that.
That's right. He created it.
Wow. So
no. He just found it. It's an open source song from a group called Zedion. But he goes out and finds his own obscure music to enjoy. So.
Well, that's impressive, especially that he's being raised by a disgruntled father.
That's correct. That is how I am known at Answers in Genesis. That is my moniker. They refuse to say my name anymore.
Right. It does kind of jump in because we're going to cover your whole situation and your family history, but given that kind of weird situation religious wise within your family, it's interesting that he picked your theme song for an atheist show.
It is interesting that they are aware of my channel. Obviously, I'm working on stuff. I'm recording all the time. They see me do my sketches of my guests and all that kind of things. And they bought me sketching supplies for Christmas, but none of them, as far as I know, have seen a single one of my videos because they refuse to. So it's an awkward truce, shall we say.
So for the uninitiated, I'll give some background. So the disgruntled father joke was what Answers in Genesis, which I believe is Eric Hoven's project now, taken over.
Ken Ham's.
Oh, is it Ken Ham? Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Creation Today is Eric Hoven. My bad. So, but either way, both of these are kind of rehashed new creationists. Like Ken Hoven was kind of the old school of 1990s VCR tapes, and these are the more modern. They've got a decent internet presence, and they at least make an attempt to look good, right? You know, that when you go to the website, it's not Dr. Dino from 1995. So anyways, they called you, an AIG, refers to you as the disgruntled father, which is just great because I'm like, what's he disgruntled from? Is he pissed that he had kids? Like, you know, that was a dumb call. You know, it's just funny because they don't say, like, disgruntled employee. That means you had problems with work, you had problems with the boss, the culture, but disgruntled father.
Really
it's funny.
Given their stance on abortion, you'd think that what they want is a lot of disgruntled fathers. They would just like that to proliferate.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not that. Oh man, he's just living in sin and is not going to make anything of himself. But
do you want some backstory on that?
Yeah. Why don't you give the full backstory?
So I've been addressing Ken Ham. He's not to get too far into the backstory, but he's the person whose books made me an atheist, got me out of young Earth creationist. Fast forward several years later. I found out that Ken Ham was coming to my province. For those of you who don't know, I'm Canadian. I live in Alberta. And Ken Ham is coming to my province to speak at the Provincial Homeschool Association. Now, having a young Earth creationist speaking to any education association is not ideal. That kind of signals the wrong thing. And so given our local news was trying to cover this, they were Googling Ken Ham in Alberta, and I'm sure my name came up. So I started appearing on some local news shows, and then I actually ended up on the national TV and national radio here in Canada.
Yeah, but
only as a Ken Ham expert, right? I know his bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly have a dog in the fight on homeschooling because my kids are all in public school. That said, I know a bit about it, but so every time they would address my appearances on the media, they started out by using my name, my real name, but then they decided, I think there was some internal policy that too many people were searching me and finding me out, and I kept getting more appearances.
Yeah.
So they changed my moniker to Disgruntled Father. So I don't really know where the leap is there, but that's the backstory, is that Ken is appearing in my province in Alberta, and I'm hoping to have some more confrontation with him. We've met once in the past, and hoping to deal with it more.
So you got contacted him by the news, not because you complained that Ken Ham was coming to speak, rather that someone else, I think somebody in that school district, was bummed out. The news gets on it, and they're looking for somebody who is an expert on Ken Ham, that really kind of knows the background and can fairly deliver the argument. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. I was vaguely aware that he was coming, but I'm not in the homeschool situation. So yeah, and the fact that Answers in Genesis, of course, they don't do their research, which I'm sure is a shock to many of your listeners. But yeah, I was not the person who complained, and nor has anyone in any case suggested that in any way he shouldn't be allowed to come and speak. Right. My problem with it, as I think most people's would be, is that I do not think that public funds should be used to buy his material. That's my only beef in this.
Okay, right. So they're public funds specifically.
Correct. In Canada, here in Alberta, the Homeschooling Association receives public funds, depending on how much you align with the program, but they all receive public funds that would normally go to where you go to school. So therefore, public money is being used to buy this material, and I do not feel it's appropriate for any religious material to be purchased with public funds.
That makes sense. And especially too, this is not somebody that's going to deliver a speech on the history of religion, how it interplays into culture, how it interplays into foreign policy, because that's something that you can gain from. If you're going to, Ken Ham is a particular kind of young earth creationist that's very ideological too. So I don't believe this is a free speech objection. Yeah, it's a religious indoctrination with public funds objection. Right,
and essentially this conference is the primary purpose of it is to let people buy material in bulk. These homeschool teachers and parents, smartly so, try and combine some of their purchasing power together at one place. So it is really more of a buying affair than something to be educated. And so that's what Ken's here for. He's here they recently opened Answers in Genesis Canada, and this is probably their first foray into trying to shove their curriculum a little further down our throat.
Yeah. And in your backstory, even going before this, is so you grew up as a Mennonite, and I guess for us heathens who may not know enough about it, because there are a lot of people like myself who confuse it with the Amish a lot. Can you just
Amish light
expand on that?
Well, in a way, it's Amish light. It's Amish, but 50 years forward, really. Yeah. So the Mennonite denomination, shall we say, was created in the 1500s by a gentleman named Menno Simons, whose big beefs were he was an Anabaptist, so he believed that babies should never be baptized, that it should always be a decision of an adult, and pacifism. Those are the two big things. From that, Mennonite tradition sprung the Amish and sprung the Hutterites. So there's kind of three very closely related things. So to imagine the Amish is not far off. Mennonites, up until my parents' generation, lived on colonies just like that. They didn't always wear black. They were allowed to wear maybe a flower pattern. They were still covered head to toe. When I went to church as a youngster, we spoke in, even though we were living in Canada, the services were in Low German. I sang hymns in Low German. Women sat on one side of the church, men on the other. All the kind of things you might associate with the Amish, but kind of progressed slightly further.
I didn't know they spoke German. So does every, well, I guess this, but every Mennonite or every Amish knows German?
Traditionally, that's what they will speak on the colony, yeah. And it's Low German. It's interesting. It's not the same German that you'd speak in Germany. It's a sort of bastardized version. So the Mennonites started in Switzerland, moved to Germany, and they were basically persecuted by communists and other people. During World War II, they fled to Russia, and then they were fled from there. And a lot of them moved to Pennsylvania, which is why you get the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Amish in that area. Anyway, and that's a tradition I grew up in. So obviously, in that kind of tradition, The Bible is absolutely infallible. There's literally not one error in that book, and compromising on anything would be terrible. And also, of course, the earth is young. It's 6,000 years old. God made it in the 600 days. So that's how I grew up. And I memorized the Bible as a teen. I was in a competition called Bible quizzing, and I was really good at it. I memorized most of the New Testament, and I taught that to teens. I went to Bible school in between, and I spent 20 years in the ministry, working with young people and helping them memorize this word, and believed it all.
So I can't let you gloss over the Jesus Jeopardy that you just mentioned.
Yeah. I was in national competitions. I got to come down to the States sometimes and compete with the best Americans.
So yeah, you have to take us there, at least mentally.
Sure.
What is Jesus? I mean, what does it look like? Do you have a buzzer? What? Yeah. Give me a question.
So it's actually more fun than that. So in order to make it exciting for the audience, everyone is there's 3 teams of 4. They're sitting on a stage, and you're sitting on either chairs or on pads or on a bench. And what you're sitting on is instead of a buzzer that you flick with your thumbs, your butt is sitting on a buzzer.
What?
And you have to jump up. And the first person to be jumping up so that your buzzer goes off, that's how it is. So it's this weird, when people think they know the answer, it's this weird collection of 12 teens on stage awkwardly trying to stand. And then a light tells you. So I kid you not, this is all happening. And then you go to a mic and you answer it. So
that's
wait. Is there tactics to like compressing your butt cheeks?
Yeah,
or
absolutely. So I trained for this. I literally sat against the wall. Now I was also played football, so it was a dual thing. But to build up lactic acid tolerance in my legs, I would literally, while I was memorizing, would sit against the wall so that my thighs could learn to hold the lactic acid long enough so that I could stay still and so it's a whole thing. I kid you not. You look it up, Alliance Bible Quizzing. It's crazy.
That is really interesting, and you know that it has to Jeopardy. Even and when you play quiz team, just your finger that buzzing, knowing how far you can push down.
Why would they have an ass buzzer? I don't get it.
It's interesting. Just total difference.
It was for a crowd because because all the parents would come and your grandparents would come, and it's more exciting to watch.
I mean, why, when The Price is Right, they come down and they're screaming and yelling, right? If they came down, like, I knew I was going to get called. It's no biggie. Just
wait, but they don't know they're going to get called.
Well, no, but the idea is like jumping up. It's excitement. Like, there is something cool about that.
You're standing up for Jesus. It's amazing.
Yeah, I figured there was some sort of theological connotation there. Okay, so all right, so you're shooting yourself up, and then give me a question that may have been asked of you.
So let's just stick it within the realm of John 3:16. Probably most of your audience knows John 3:16. So at one point, one of the questions might have been, quote John 3:16. You stand up and you have to say a word perfectly. But another question might have been something like, who so loved the world? And the answer is God, right? But when you're thinking about this in the jumping scenario, so you get who so loved the world, but as soon as you jump, then they stop asking the question. So if you jump too soon, you might only get who, or you might get who so. Yeah. And so you have to really, so I got really good at knowing like these 2-word phrases that only appear one place in the Bible, because if you can pick out a 2-word phrase, you can answer almost anything. And it was
little strategies,
little strategies, and you got points, and you'd get as you can imagine, in a spelling bee situation, you have provincial champions and national champions and trophies and scholarships. In fact, I paid for my whole Bible school with Bible quizzing scholarships.
That's sweet.
That I won.
That is very impressive in a weird subsegment of quizzing, I guess.
But if you can imagine how many hours I spent on that and how many I wish I had back.
But I mean, there's a knowledge base there. I was the religion guy on our quiz team. And these were relatively easy religious questions, but not that many people were religious, so I looked like the genius.
Well, you're from a super conservative family too, so
I mean, I guess, but I mean, there was little things that I would do too. Like he's memorizing the 2-word phrases, like what's 9 factorial? That means 9 times 8 times. It's 362,880. Right? It's not that I did that in my head. I just memorized all my factorials to 11 and down, because they would come up so often, and then I would just pound it out, and then the other team freaks out because they think I'm a math wizard. I just haven't memorized. So I can appreciate the quiz strategy here.
Well, I was on Quiz Bowl too. I was just terrible at everything. So
really?
Yeah, so I was like the B team. I only knew odd. I didn't even have like a go-to. I guess geography and history, but everyone.
So were you the cool one or the good-looking one, or how did you stay on the team?
No, I don't.
He was on the B team.
I was on the
Oh,
B team. The B team just hung out. I don't know. In case
the B team was the B team was fun though. Like you'd party with them.
For some reason, I'm imagining the whole Spider-Man Homecoming. I don't know if you saw that movie, but the B team gets to go on the trip to Washington D.C., but doesn't have to do anything.
No, it was nice because that's exactly what happened. But I was always like, damn, if I put a little more time into this, maybe I could be on the A team, but I never did. All right. So that from your backstory, that was the one thing that really shot forward for me. I really wanted to know what that type of theological, quizzing was all.
Right. The interesting thing about that was that no questions were theological in nature. There was never interpretation of the Bible. It was always, because that was just that left you too open to various things. And I spent many, many years as the answer judge. So the way that my particular denomination treated that Bible was that it was just those words were what was upheld. It was almost like we worshiped that book more than we worshipped the person we thought wrote it.
Sure. But I assume that nothing in the questioning kind of touched on touchy issues within the Bible. Like they didn't say how many passages in the Bible refer to homosexuals and name them. Like
no. But there'd be often things like men. So, for example, in Galatians, that men should not have long hair as a disgrace to them. I quoted that verse on stage, earned 20 points while I had hair down to my shoulder blades. And it was fine. And you would hear there'd be girls who'd be quoting the verse, women must remain silent in the church. They should not speak. Another verse from Galatians. And the irony of it, even as a Christian, just kind of blows your mind.
That is awesome. So were they all quotes? I mean, did they ever say the Catholics have it wrong on this because they believe wrongly, and then you're supposed to like spit out the wrong answer?
No, we didn't. We didn't ever do that. Again, we just worshipped the literal words in the book, like they held special magic powers on their own. Right. That's one of the weird things about it, was that you were not learning life lessons. You were. It was all from my perspective, it was all authority. It's just like everything in the church is top down. It's like you accept this because someone above you said so. And that's what it really drills in.
Yeah, I agree. And I, in some ways, and I really like that, your defense on the charge that you were against free speech and that you were trying to silence Ken Ham, because I didn't see anything that you were against free speech at all. And the one piece, the one kernel that I'll give them is when the woman, I think it was on Eric Hoven's program, was complaining, well, I don't, want my kids to be pumped full of ideology at school. I thought to myself, well, I agree with that. I don't want, communist ideology or radical feminist ideology or whatever being pushed on you, but you're not actually looking for a freedom from ideology. You actually just want a safe space for your own. And that's where I think the hypocrisy comes from.
Absolutely. And it's not like I trust a lot of these homeschool kids to be learning critical thinking skills, because I was not. Mm-hmm. Rote memorization was what was praised. Right.
And then the absence of challenge, that they want a place where Ken Ham can talk to a bunch of kids and say, all right, the God first, we believe God, not the scientists. Mm-hmm. So really, once you can say, you're just saying, well, this is fiction. You're really, I mean, how ideological is that?
Oh, it's in a microcosm, and you can't talk to anyone. You can't question. That's the weird thing about homeschooling, is you don't have that peer-to-peer interaction. It makes it very difficult to get out of your thought bubble.
Oh. But what it did for me was when we took the Bible so literally that there was 1000% inerrant, nothing could be taken as allegory. It was all thing. Then for me, all it took was the one chink, and it all fell apart. It's not like people who come from fundamentalist backgrounds don't tend to become agnostic. You know,
you're already prone to the binary.
You're prone to the binary already. So as soon as I'm like, well, there was never an Adam and Eve, well, that was a very short trip to the entire Bible is wrong.
It's a good point. And ultimately that's where it came for me, although we were Catholic. So we're allowed to believe in evolution, at least ever since 1995 with the encyclical. You're allowed to believe in evolution, as you know, that's fine. So the young Earth creationist thing isn't it enough to upset Catholicism, but it is if you really do have to take young Earth creationism word for word.
Well, you do if you want to believe the Bible word for word. I found it interesting, Paul. You mentioned in another interview that you happen to talk to pastors or ministers, and you question them on some of these things, and they were like, "Oh yeah, well, it's a foregone conclusion that Moses was a mythical figure," and you were like, "Wait, you knew this whole time and didn't tell anyone?" And so that is interesting. I don't know how much of an impact that had. Was that what solidified your disbelief?
Yeah, that was when. So I very quickly, not very quickly, it took about a year, but for me, as soon as I accepted that evolution was true, human chromosome 2 was the final male. It's like, okay, this is all true. Now what do I do? I was willing to entertain the whole theistic evolution because that's fine, but and I'm doing a series on it this year about what I learned about the Bible, because I immediately turned to my book that I had worshipped, and I went to Bible school and I learned all this stuff. So I start finding out that the documentary hypothesis, say, or the forgeries of the Pauline letters and all those kind of things that I would then go to my pastors, as you said, or my Bible school teachers, and you stare them blank in the face, and they just literally, they left it out because they didn't trust us with the information. And so pastors know this, and if you're protecting your congregation from a truth, then you don't have the truth, right? And that was actually where my betrayal. I didn't feel betrayed because they taught me young Earth creationism, because I knew they believed it. Like, I can't be mad at my parents for teaching me what they honestly thought, but the people who knew about these things that I should be doubting the book, or thinking that the book is a human one, and kept it from me, those were the people that I still hold anger to, that I feel like I was betrayed. I gave them thousands of dollars for them to teach me something they knew was not true.
It's like Scientology not teaching about Xenu and the Thetans until you're, $500,000 in or some ridiculous amount. And then they're like, well, there's also this insane mythology. Here you go. Knock yourself out.
And believe it fully under threat of ass beating.
Torsion.
Right.
Yeah.
So my video series that I'm doing this year is literally, it's not going to be doing any kind of proselytizing at all, but I'm going to lay out the facts that I learned after my deconversion about the Bible that I wish I knew then. And I know most of the pastors around the world know this information and maintain their faith. So it's not like learning this information is going to drive someone away necessarily, but it's unfair that people don't know.
Right. But it might alter your faith. You may move from the position of, I believe the essence of the Bible, but it may not be true word for word, but the essence is good. And then you can kind of land there. I think that people are afraid of the slippery slope. If you're the fundamentalist, you can't stand that, because that's the first step away from God.
Sure, but I see that in my viewers, and I see that in my family. I have younger cousins who, I can't name because they don't want me to, but who, you start with this chink or that chink and that chink, and then eventually you soften, and then it's in part of that softening, then they also soften on, well, maybe I don't have to hate gay people so much.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't have to push, maybe I don't have to vote right wing if I don't feel like it's the right thing to do. So I feel pleased with that. And I'm more excited if some of them become, if they give up their faith in things that aren't true. But at least I feel like moving people down that spectrum is a worthy endeavor.
I wonder, when you were going through your process, you kind of completely abandoned the faith. You went atheist. Obviously, Brian and I are very familiar with this with this phenomenon. But did you ever think there's room for certain lessons from your Christian background that can remain. I asked this in this context. So Jordan Peterson, who's pretty popular these days, he's an avid, he's religious. He's an avid Christian, but he doesn't believe in the ideology. And he makes a very big distinction between, like, I don't believe in the ideology, but I believe in the lessons that are imbued in the Bible. It's essentially the essence of truth in how we develop as a society and how we interact with each other. And so when you listen to that, while I have, a profound hatred for organized religion because it's the opiate of the masses, I listen to that and I go, okay, I can see how someone can remain in the faith, go, this is bullshit, but I like the core tenets underneath, and I'm gonna stay. So did that ever cross your mind, or is that something that you've ever considered?
So in terms of crossing my mind, no. I got so emotionally caught up in that everything I taught was lies that I threw it all out and I said, everything has to now be proven to me from scratch. I'm not giving anything the benefit of any doubt. Every single verse, while some may be useful, and in fact, I think there are things in the Old Testament that might be roughly historically true and whatever else, but each one has to prove it to me. I'm not giving any of it the benefit of doubt. So for me personally, no. And then what, in terms of have I considered it, I've now had a few years to digest how I want to be as a human.
Yeah.
And when I was a Christian, I would hear the phrase cafeteria Christian, which were people who kind of picked and chose what they wanted.
A la carte Christian.
Exactly. And for when I was a Christian, that was a snide remark. That was an insult to call somebody the cafeteria Christian. But when I honestly look, every single Christian is that. Every single Christian, they could be sitting next to each other in the same pew, listening to the same message, and they all pick and choose what little things they want. And so far in my reconstruction of the Bible, I've yet to find anything in there that can't be adequately found elsewhere. Like the Golden Rule existed centuries before Jesus allegedly said it. Do we really need the Bible as a foundation not to kill each other? Like that's just evolutionary benefit, right? We don't kill our own species. So no, I don't see anything unique in Christianity.
Right. Hammurabi there's a positive code of laws in Hammurabi's code that predates the Bible.
But that's more an eye for an eye than turn the other cheek. I mean,
it's still predating. There's a mandate against murder, like before the Bible. I mean, it predates when the Bible is supposed to be written.
Absolutely.
But if I can tag on there, but I would just finish that. When I look at the red words that are in the Bible, the ones that Jesus allegedly said,
red words,
most Christians I know don't follow those anyway. Like your Trump Christians, like give all your money to the poor, turn the other cheek, like all those lessons about meekness and all those lessons about looking after other people. I don't see that in Christianity anyway. I mean, I see it in pockets of it, but as a tenet of North American Christianity, I don't think that's what they're following. So I don't think I just don't observe that they're following what their master supposedly said anyhow. That's my rant.
Yeah, no, Jesus is clearly a socialist.
Absolutely. He wouldn't vote Republican ever.
No, I mean, there's no chance of it unless you're a dominionist. And then I heard Ted Cruz's father say that there is a specific verse in the Bible that's against the capital gains tax. Right now, that is one hell of an interpretation.
Wow!
I thought that's just impressive. I don't know which one it is. I really do want to dig this up, but that he claims this, and I thought, like capital gains tax, right?
Would it be like you can keep the fish if you have two fish and they have an offspring? You can keep the fish that they had that baby fish.
Income tax is a modern thing.
No, I know. I'm trying to put it into the context of a biblical age.
I know, but it's hilarious. But it's funny that they tend to be capitalistic, right? So it doesn't fit. And I'm not saying that I'm not an anti-capitalist. I am a capitalist.
Capitalism and Jesus are like this.
Yeah.
I would say that Jesus hung out with prostitutes, and that is a trend that is increasing in politics. So
among Republicans.
I'm just saying in politics, you can flavor that however you want.
I think that I don't. I'm pro prostitution. I do not understand why that should be
we're
illegal.
both libertarian.
Yeah. So I think that that's a sex thing. So I think that goes all ways, independent, Republican, Democrat.
I find it interesting, Paul. You in your past, you used to work for Lucasfilm.
Correct.
And you were a devout Christian at that time. So I find it fascinating that you didn't turn to some form of atheism while you're working on these, I'd say, fantastical works of fiction, and then trying to lead a super humble Mennonite lifestyle. I don't know how these two didn't clash.
I honestly cannot explain that at all either. Other than that, for anyone who has experienced or is aware of cognitive dissonance and or compartmentalization,
yeah,
work was work, and I was living this massive dream working for George Lucas on these movies that I loved, and yet I went on Sunday. I was still worship leading. I think it was. I think the separation walls were so thick that it took moving away from that. And giving myself some introspection. Yeah, I can't explain it either, because I was living in San Francisco. Like, where else should I have discovered that this stuff was, that gay people were okay? I don't know. That I had to move back to
is there a
Bible Belt.
Burgeoning Mennonite population in San Francisco?
There is not. No, no. We had to pick a different flavor of church to go to because, that's not a California thing.
Well, even religion as a whole is not very. I don't.
No, we had to drive an hour to find a church that we felt even modestly matched with our fundamental beliefs. So up in the Sonoma County, for those who are familiar with the area, it took that far away from the city to find our brand of Christians.
How does that work, by the way? Because I've never church shopped before. So do you audit a sermon and then you go, okay, I like what he said.
That's a good question.
I'm feeling this vibe. I think I'm going to stay here. How does that process work?
So yeah, absolutely all the above. Throw in, do you like the music? I think for a lot of people, it's do you like the music? When you have young kids, as I did at the time, it's what kind of kid programs do they have? It's almost like buying a home. It's do they have the good schools?
Without a pool. Right. We might need a pool. It's hot around here.
Yeah, absolutely. So church shopping is a very weird thing, and that's actually a phenomenon amongst those who are still in the church. The attention span is short, and people are not becoming members of churches anymore. Even those who are devout, they will jump from church to church depending on the phase of their life, and often just the band. Do we like the band or not?
That's the power of music. Now, none of these band music, because there's a number of very fundamentalist churches that are anti-dancing, and the only music could be either Christian music or a cappella, or you could go full on ISIS and no music at all unless it's singing the Quran, and only under specific circumstances.
Sure, but most of your big churches now have gone to worshiping the PowerPoint, as my mother calls it. Where there is and when I was in California, I seriously did worship lead, and I was the only member of the band that wasn't a professional musician, and that was a way you earned followers out of other people. And so we had literally people who drummed for a living on our drums, and a lot of that is generational, but obviously coming from this Mennonite background where what we sang was a cappella hymns, 4-part harmony always, and maybe the piano when you got rowdy on something, to these mega churches that have light shows. Wow. And honestly, wardrobe that is probably not appropriate. It's all that stuff sells. And if you are in the business of getting tithes, you got to do what you got to do. And theology is a very small part of it.
But it makes sense why it sells. I view it as a social circle. So if people want to keep religion around so that they can get together and they can talk about stuff or talk about their neighbors after the sermon, whatever, or you're essentially going to a rock concert every week. I mean, if that's your form of entertainment and you want to pay for that, then I guess that's cool. Well, I don't remember who it was. Maybe I was listening to Sam Harris, but he was saying he was equating yoga classes and Tai Chi, whatever the hell, to a modern day version of the church experience with millennials, with secular people. It's their community building experience. So I find this not to be surprising that people are going to these mega churches for the experience.
But if you look at the neurological studies for all this stuff, I mean, the kind of euphoria that they play on is music driven. Like every altar call I answered, and I answered too many, you know, was because they had played the exact right playlist, right, to move you to finally, you know, just as I am, without one, you know, it's to bring you up. Like the experts in this know that the score, just like in filmmaking, when we had John Williams score that stuff to make you feel a certain way, in church, there's a reason why when the long prayers happen, they have the light music playing underneath, and that's not accidental. That's all planned. I mean, it's social manipulation of things that we know work. Endorphin releases don't come from a really theologically sound sermon.
Yeah, in Disney, they have the smellomatic. There's a machine that specifically blows some sort of pleasant odor throughout the whole the whole park, yeah, to make you hungry. I mean, the manipulation of your senses by large corporations and churches is fascinating. If it was a field, I would love to study it. That actually reminds me, I'm going to reveal something about myself. What's the most hated band of all time? If you had to say.
Of course, Nickelback.
Okay.
Nickelback, yeah.
So Nickelback, I was moving from the first time I ever moved from home. I was actually moving to Wisconsin from Michigan, and I was packing my car, and I happened to have the radio on while doors are open, packing the car, and the song Photograph comes on. And Photograph, if you don't, I mean, whatever, go and listen to it. But it's a Nickelback song, and it's all about, you know, your home and I think you're leaving it or you're remembering it. So it has all these elements of nostalgia with it. And it was just the absolute perfect time for that song to go on, for me to be leaving, you know, whatever, my ancestral home. It was an epic moment. And I can totally relate to how music can really impact your scene. Or me now loving Nickelback because of that one song playing at that one specific time. No, I wanted to touch on your obviously your religious experience, which is perfect, but your exodus from there into atheism. You mentioned there were a lot of people who impacted you, these pastors who you talked to, but who from the atheist community really got you out? You mentioned Dawkins and some others. Was there one specific figure who really stands out as being the nail in the coffin?
The nail in the coffin was actually Seth Andrews, with his background, because it was very similar to mine, and I was very lost. I was married and had kids and was still going to church every weekend. And I didn't feel I could trust anyone with this new information. But somehow on my Facebook feed, Seth responding to Joshua Fierstein, his atheist challenge, $100,000 atheist challenge, if anyone remembers that. And I probably saw it a couple years late, but I watched that and all I was like, wait, that word atheist that I thought was equivalent to the worst thing you could be, that's what I am. Like, he was the one that pushed me over. So I immediately, started listening to his podcast and his books. So he was the tipping point. It very quickly got me into the atheist experience with, Matt Dillahunty was a big influence on me. All the YouTubers at the time, which is kind of how come I landed up on YouTube myself now. So your Logics and Aaron Ra with a lot of his videos, and Dark Matter 25 and Potholer and all those kind of things. I didn't have a community I could trust, so I had to turn to anonymous online community because everyone that I worked with, every friend that I had, and every member of my family was a fundamentalist Christian. So I had to turn to anonymous people that I didn't know.
No, that's a similar piece. I know Aaron Ra, like, and his science and the genetics. I heard you talk about chromosome 2. I know what you're talking about there. You know, helped really kind of like, you know, break it for me. But the question, I guess, more interesting, and a lot of people that are talking about now is, what do you do with that? What do you do with your non-belief? I noticed the statement that you have. It's on your YouTube. You describe yourself as a former Christian who takes a look at the claims of the religious, where science is being denied in the name of ancient books. What about like in the name of modern ideology? Because it seems like the atheist conferences used to be a place where you could ask anything, and now certain questions, like, you know, is social justice the right thing to do, is not a question you can ask. You know, the evidence given is, and you're cited Judith Butler, and then
Right.
I read Judith Butler and it's gobbledygook. I mean, this is no better than the Bible, and yet I'm, you know, branded a Nazi for not doing this, just like I would be branded heathen and atheist. What do you make of this, and what do you make of, like, you know, organized atheism, if that's a thing?
Well, organized atheism in some ways is great. So when you are ripped from the community that the church provides, there isn't a direct allegory on the other side. There isn't a direct. That's allegory is the wrong word, but there isn't an analogous on the other side that I could jump to and start going to the atheist church. So it was something like, it was CFI skeptics in the pub and a few events like that I looked up, and it was like, can I find a single person who says they're an atheist in the world and become their friend, kind of a thing. So if it wasn't for organizations having events, then I wouldn't have found my current local support group. So in that way, it was important. But as, like, when I hear atheism as a movement or atheism as a political platform or any of that kind of stuff, I back away from that as hard as I back away from anything religious, because no, what we have in common is one claim. We lack a belief in a God or something stronger than that. So to try and lump us together, like, I'm very fiscally conservative, even though I've become very socially liberal. That does not jive with everyone, you know, who probably all of your listeners even. We're allowed to have all those different opinions.
So all right, because that's what happens.
We've been labeled alt-right and Nazi.
Yeah.
The whole shebang.
So, you know, so in terms of that doesn't bother me. I'm not excited. It's also too young. I mean, my passion, unfortunately, well, be if it is, because everyone, I feel like my passion is the people I left behind, including my 3 teenagers who all still are young Earth creationists. And so that's why you see on my channel, like, people like, young Earth creationist, hasn't that been debunked 1,000 times? Not the people I know and see face to face at family gatherings. And the trouble is, most of the videos out there used to just mock them, right? And it's easy to mock because it's so ridiculous. But I still remember what it's like to believe it.
Yeah. And that's what I noticed on your channel, is there's not mocking. You're debunking the claims, and where they get it right, you know, you're saying, actually, no, I agree with that. Go on. You're compassionate in your criticism. And to me, that makes a good activist. A good activist needs to have a lot of patience, because you're trying to, these people are human beings. You were there. You just want them to see it your way, or a little bit more your way. Like, this is where I don't get the new ideological atheism, which is so far left that, you know, I can't see it around the curvature of the earth. That then they're telling me, oh, if you don't believe this, then you're like, wow, that's religion. And where's the compassion? And that's what I can really appreciate about your videos is, yes, you make jokes, but it's never at the expense. I mean, or if they're being blatantly dishonest, you'll call it out, but I never see meanness. And to me, that makes the great activist. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Although I would also flip side say, like, someone like Godless Engineer, or, you know, other channels that do, like, I think there is a place for mockery as well. In part of the ways, that was part of also what helped shake me out of it, was like, when you see someone spot on mocking someone and you're like, wait, that's me. And that's a really good point. There's some embarrassment factor that I think it takes all flavors. I think if every channel was like mine, it wouldn't be effective. But I just felt there was a lack of channels like mine. I think there are more now. Vice Rhino and others are doing a great job. But until my 3 kids are converted, it's kind of my mission.
But you're right that there's multiple strategies. The mockery that is a powerful tool, right? Thomas Nash did this. This is how Boss Tweed goes down back in the day, right? I mean, it worked for people that were illiterate. Cartoons in the newspaper, so that makes sense to me. But you fully admit that there's other ways. But it seems like this purity movement,
which is part of why I never swear on my channel. For example, I know that my parents and anyone else, if they hear the word fuck, nothing you say after that will be heard.
Yeah.
Like it's a shutdown word.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had no idea that that religious people were so up in arms about swearing. So that was an eye opener when you mentioned that in another podcast. And I was going to ask you, how prevalent is this? I mean, is this just among Mennonites, or is it across all religions that people shut down?
Here's what I would suggest. So if you go and look there's a number of movie sites out there that rate the appropriateness for Christians of certain movies.
No way.
Absolutely. And actually, here's the flip side. If you are an 18-year-old boy or a teen boy and you want to know which movies have nudity, go to the Christian websites, because they spell out in great detail whether you're seeing side boob or front, like it's all
half nip.
They've got that all documented better than anyone else could. But
wow. So if you have your fetish, you can zoom.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think that's what they intend those sites for. But if you go there, the worst thing a movie can do is swear. Like they have that ranked as most inappropriate, more inappropriate than nudity, and certainly like violence. They do not care. You can kill 1 million people. But if you have, they count how many swear words there are. And for them, the swear words, of course, like goddamn and things like that count for them. But fuck or shit, like that's just, you can't go.
Okay. So like John Wayne movies would do better. Lots of violence.
Oh, absolutely.
But not a lot of cussing,
I guess.
And the threats and badassness, but
I mean,
it's not like yippee-ki-yay, mother.
Yeah, motherfucker.
Yeah, it's not Die Hard.
That's why you got yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon on TBS. Because
wait, really?
Nice.
That's what they changed it to. Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon.
That just sounds idiotic.
And that's why there's a burgeoning business.
That ruins McClane. Completely ruins him.
It does. I agree. But if you didn't know any different, you might get away with it. But that's hilarious that, we want our Die Hard, but we don't want, we just don't want the swear words. Forget people being gunned down. I mean, there's a war in the middle of a city.
Isn't there at least one sex scene in Die Hard? I can't remember it.
Die Hard, So I watch Die Hard every Christmas with my kids. So this is how I know this.
It's great. It's a Christmas movie.
But there's a bunch of porn pictures up on a wall that John walks by and he kisses one of them. And so, and also there's sex in one of the offices early on. So I always, with my kids, I kind of just try and distract them for a minute, because I know that my ex-wife would not want them to see the boobs that are involved.
Okay. But the swearing is worse.
Well, the swearing is absolutely worse. And if you are a fundamentalist Christian of any denomination, anything said after the curse word, you may as well not have said it.
Yeah.
Speaking of family, I know we kind of keep skipping back and forth about your etymology, your coming out story, but you mentioned that whole experience for you, the year of going atheist, was really a shitstorm. So can you talk about kind of the what happened, the inner turmoil, and really how the community and maybe your family reacted to you starting to question things?
Sure. So I finally felt so much. Well, it was actually sitting in church every single Sunday, and not believing it, but looking around and realizing that I had examined my faith far more than any of these people, and they were all going to go to heaven if this was all true, and I wasn't, and I was being punished. I eventually had to say something to my spouse. I just couldn't sit there every Sunday. And that did not go well. That was a deal breaker.
What were you like, honey, I'm not sure about this? Or, I mean, was it you were talking about a particular...
I probably, in hindsight, didn't make it gradual enough. And that is actually something I advise people when they're trying to come out, is to maybe sow the seeds and maybe just talk about, even if you fully decided that you're an atheist now, mentioned that maybe you're doubting here and there, because I kind of I just went straight to basically, from what I've learned, that I no longer believe in Earth creationism, and that because there was no Adam and Eve, I don't believe in the Bible anymore either.
Yeah.
Kind of straight to that, which probably was too much of a shock, but that was handled. That was not welcome news at all. Suddenly there was that spread from her. She outed me in areas that I was not ready to come out, and our pastor suggested that the way to fix that was for her to kick me out of the house, thinking that was going to that I would learn my lesson and need to come back.
Did you sleep on the couch that night, by the way?
Well, I slept in a different house because I was no longer welcome in the one where I was. Fortunately, I managed to maintain a relationship with my kids, but obviously it affected all those other relationships I've talked about. And then a few months later, I was actually diagnosed with cancer. So I had those two things happen right at the same time. And what struck me most was that all those people who had been my friends for decades, if they talked to me at all, the message that I got was, well, you got what you deserved. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, did they draw a correlation between the cancer and the...
They absolutely did, and that was particularly hurtful. Now, fortunately, my closest family, my parents and my sister, stuck by me, even though they violently disagree with what I believe. They stuck by me emotionally, but virtually everyone else, the church. But and partially because I was on stage every Sunday, I was a known person, so that I think they had to cut that off, because you can't have, you just can't have this youth leader now who is known to be, anyway. I shouldn't attribute what their motivations were, but the reality was that I was just completely abandoned by the people who were my friends for decades, and so I was very lost. It was a brutal year, as you can imagine. But I mean, in hindsight, I came out of it. You can't know what's going to happen, but fortunately, at this point, I'm cancer free, so that's fine. A genetic anomaly in me helped save my hand, which I always find hilarious. So I didn't have this particular mutation, which is totally evidence of evolution. I may not have my hand now. Things like that. But
have you thrown that back kind of in their faces, saying, ha, God save the heathen?
Well,
something along those lines.
In their head, the fact that that's all just evidence that God's, it's weird, because they can rationalize anything. That's all just evidence that God's not done with me yet, right?
God was only 75% mad.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is, I think you make a good point in that, especially people coming out of more fundamentalist, particular institutions, or whether it's a sect or something, like, do need that place to go where you can kind of feel okay. Because again, you're just because you're prone, or just because you're on the other side, doesn't mean you're not prone to the binary. So I get that feeling, what you did, your wife just spit it all out. I think it's a lot easier to go slowly once you've normalized. But if you're brand new, you haven't normalized. And that process, the atheist community, I think, is good for. And that's why I don't like other ideologies being spit into that, oh, you're here now, but guess what? This is what you also have to believe. To me, that's just joining a different church. That isn't going to help you.
No, that's a good point. It's very, and again, I've heard you say this, Paul, is that the atheist community is very welcoming. So people who come out, they're embraced. And this is why, Brian and I never really talked politics on our show until a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago. And that's because the new politics of the new atheism has become a religion. And so now if someone comes out, they have to deal with this. Well, what kind of atheist are you? Do you love people? Do you love immigrants? Or are you a far righter? Are you a Nazi? Right. And you're like, holy shit, I'm not prepared for that conversation either.
It was exactly what Hitchens used to say when he'd be in Northern Ireland, and they'd ask, are you a Protestant or are you a Catholic? I'm an atheist.
Yes.
Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist? It just smacks of that, but at least they're somewhat consistent. And now there's a full scale rejection of Christopher Hitchens. God, I mean, who was, I just think, just phenomenal. In atheism, at least organized atheism, and that just boggles my mind.
He was my nail in the coffin, by the way.
He was just
Hitch Hitch wasn't how I came to atheism, but he was how I left. Well, I was never really in a religion, but it was how I completely solidified my disfaith.
Yeah, I'm very sad that I was I didn't come to discover him until after he'd passed. We lost a great one.
Yeah. When I was watching his videos and loving him so much, I'm not going to see him. And then I noticed that there's somewhere he was bald. And I purposely didn't watch those because I thought, oh, maybe he's got cancer and is already dead. But I didn't want to know that right away. So I continued to watch ones where he had hair.
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, like, right. Or just, I'm not ready to see the results of my test yet. That kind of thing.
Although I will say that his handling of cancer helped me inform mine, in great ways. And to very quickly have to come to grips with the fact that after I die will be exactly the same way as it was before I was born, helped me deal with what I was dealing with. And so, if he hadn't have gone through that, I may not have learned that lesson as well. So
he faced it with aplomb. I thought that was absolutely impressive on how he continued to give 100% effort despite how badly he was feeling. He described this at length. That was an amazing that period. I just wasn't ready for it at the beginning, but I did watch all of them, and yeah, it's amazing.
I think that's one of the final frontiers is when you come to grips with your own mortality, and you realize, and that's one of the things that really has helped me is figuring out, okay, we're all going to die, and we have a solid, whatever it is, 70, 80, 90, maybe more years on this earth. That's a really long time for an organism that has the size of brain that we have, for the longevity that we have, is unbelievable. And I just actually had an experience in December. I was on vacation and we were on a plane with my wife. And there was some unbelievable like I've experienced turbulence, but nothing like this for a solid hour and a half. And I'm watching a movie. At some point I was like, oh, this is kind of serious. But then I was like, whatever. She started getting really scared. So I turned to her and I go, and she's pissed at this. And I go, well, she asked me, she's like, have you ever experienced this much turbulence? I'm like, no, never. And I go, but honey, remember, whatever you do, there is no God. And she was furious. I mean, she's an atheist too, but it was just
not the time.
But in that moment, when you want to hear some sort of comfort, I was so at peace with, like, if we're gonna die, let's do this thing. But I'm gonna watch the end of this movie. Like
got your priorities.
Like I will do this before the I hope they don't cut off the electricity. But it just didn't. Not even for a second did it occur to me that I have to come to terms with, what kind of shitty person I've been, earlier in my life or whatever. No, it was just, that's it. We live in the moment, and there's nothing after this. And there's so many people that don't go through that thought process. They just, they think that they somehow, maybe that's a good control for them to be a good human being while they live.
But the other side, you can provide comfort too, though. You're basically saying both things, I think.
Oh, I should have provided comfort?
No. That you're saying the non-belief provided the comfort for you. In some cases,
absolutely,
the person could face their death because they believe something else is waiting for them. They believe that they've lived a good life, and that provides them comfort.
Sure, it's comforting lie versus, honest truth. So
right.
Or if they think they're going to hell because they've been such a shitty person. And then
now you got craziness.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think holds people to religion is fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And when people ask me what harm does religion do? Like, I don't hate gay people, and I don't, I'm not killing abortion doctors, so religion is fine. I'm like, no, what religion does is it steals people's one and only life. They treat this life like it's a floor mat to wipe your feet on. And you put up with anything because that's what you're supposed to do, and you waste the one and only chance you had. And that's the thing that makes me more angry than any lie that I was told, or thing that someone mistakenly taught me, is that I cannot get the time back. And so I think the real harm is in stealing people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Now that's true for a fundamentalist. What do you say to the Christian that is a cafeteria Catholic or Christian or whatever, and says, I look at it more of a philosophy. Maybe this is right, maybe this. I'm not a literalist, but I just think that there's some good messages that I can take from here. I believe in a God, and I call myself a Christian, but I don't know. Like, what do you think to that?
I say to that person that they are living. They're probably mistaken. They probably don't value truth, and you can't make someone value truth. That's something I've learned, which is weird. Mm-hmm. But that kind of person is theoretically living the life they would choose, and so their life isn't getting stolen necessarily.
Not stolen, because like Stephen Gould would qualify here, and this is a person that's critical. He's. He believes that there's God, but this guy, he's not a fundamentalist. When I look at what he's saying, that's a philosophy more so than a religion. Mm-hmm. And I guess I just don't have near the beef with it. I mean,
but that's just like, Wisconsin is known for football. Well, beer, cheese, football. The Packers are huge here. So every Sunday, people devote 3 hours or whatever it is to watching a football game. If you're a cafeteria Christian, I see you as the same way. You're just devoting a certain part of your Sunday or whatever it is to something that brings happiness into your life. Football is useless, it's meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe, but it's a form of entertainment. And listen, if you want to go to your mega church and you want to watch your stupid rock concert I think it's stupid, but if it's not stupid for you, hey, mazel tov, whatever, do your thing. That's
what do you think? What do you think about that, Paul?
I frankly, I am okay with that, because my beef is, again, with the ones that want to teach science that we know is false, that want to promote social, and this isn't just Christianity now, but who want to oppress women in the name of religions, be it a hijab or just saying that I'm the head of the household and you got to do what I say. I've seen enough of that go be terrible. So no, the cafeteria time that you're the kind that go, and I've heard this too, the kind that go because that's where all their friends are and everyone in town goes to church Sunday morning and that's where you make business deals or whatever. Great, you're a social club. Those people are not keeping anything back. It's the ones that get into politics or get into the legal system and are trying to, in any way, create a theocracy. That's where I fight.
It's the ideology that you have a problem with, and those that are going to support the fundamentalist version of that.
Or if they fakely wear their religion on their sleeve. That pisses me off. Like, there is no way that out of our entire Congress, there's not a single atheist. I mean, it is patently, it's not representative of our population. So there's zero chance that that's the case, yet we have everyone being some sort of theist. That pisses me off, is the disingenuousness. If they said that they were, if they believed in a certain amount
but is it, I mean,
it'd be fine.
Yeah.
I just saw a video.
But Obama, do you think Obama was for gay marriage 8 years ago? He didn't run on the platform that way, but then he moves on it because he's waiting for the right time to say it. So I'm kind of going to take the optimistic bent there, that they're just waiting for the right time.
I don't know if they're waiting. I mean, take Bernie. Bernie, I think, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, is an atheist. But he hasn't come out and said it. He kind of skirts the issue, which is fine. And he's got the whole socialist thing to deal with, which is kind of a tough sell to the American public. But I mean,
socialist and atheist
and Jewish, all in one package.
Pretty much Stalin. No, that's a tough sell. But if anyone should, I think he's the most honest politician that I've seen ever. And he doesn't even come out to say it. So you know how powerful religion is in this country, rooted, if he can't come out and say it. It's something to think about. What I was going to say is I saw a really interesting video about about degrees of Christianity, and how certain people, certain people come out, others don't, but the vast majority of folks stick to their religion because otherwise they'd be ostracized from their community, and you kind of have to stick to your guns. Well, not everyone. Paul, we didn't get to, I would say, a fraction of the topics that we want to talk with you about, but we got through your etymology, just your core beliefs, how you came through the whole process, which is exciting. We probably are going to want to have you back to unpack
the genetic. His YouTube channel, I think, is really good. You got to check it out. He breaks down genetic issues actually in a way. You're like a mini Arn Ra. I think like you do it very, very well. You talk a little slower, so sometimes that helps. And I mean,
that's not a dig. That's a good thing,
right? Well,
no, I get it. But what really helps me is that I so recently I had to learn all this myself as an adult, so it really helps that I actually don't have the background. I've had to I can phrase it in a way that someone who doesn't know it understands, because a year ago I didn't. So,
and you do the research. So if somebody says, well, they've brought in a person, but they've been published, I don't know, like maybe I'll go look that up, but I probably won't. And you do. And I thought, thank you, because that's going to save me an hour's worth of Googling. And here you go. And I thought this is a very good breakdown. You admit when they're right and criticize them when they're wrong. So to me, like, yeah, pursuit of the truth, I'm for that. And Paulogia's channel on YouTube is great.
You bring in anecdotes from your life as a Christian, and the fact that you memorize the goddamn Bible, a whole thing.
Just the New Testament, to be fair.
Oh, you didn't do the Old Testament?
No, just the New Testament.
I've lost
just 27 books.
So he's Hafiz. Testament.
Jesus.
Well, that's how you can memorize the Quran, but not the Bible. It's a smaller book.
It is, but what about the Jews listening to you? Come on, man.
Well,
you got to bring them in. No, it's an absolute pleasure. If you get a chance, you may or may not have heard that we put on an annual event, which now we've kind of released the date. It's the 22nd of September. So hopefully, if it's not too arduous of a task, you should definitely look to come to Milwaukee on the 22nd. We'll definitely have you as a special guest and kind of show you around town. Especially if you're a big beer drinker, then Brian and I will throw some down with you. So that's exciting. We'd love to have you there. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll want to have you back to unpack a bunch of your videos.
Well, it was a pleasure. Yeah, anytime. And especially once I'm into the Bible series as well as coming up, we'll have a lot to talk about how Moses wasn't a guy.
Yeah. I really like that argument. I think that's a good one. And even whether you end up, I don't always seek to have them end up at atheism, but just end up as, maybe I'm wrong.
That's right. Do no harm, Christians, is what we want.
Being very active in the Jewish community here, I drop that one on people quite a bit. So when you do your one on Moses,
I love it.
Bring us in on that one.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Cool,
Paul.
guys. Great pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.